My friends, today we stand at a moment of historic magnitude. The events of September 15th are not just headlines. They are shockwaves across the globe. Qatar and its Arab allies have declared war, a decision that reverberates far beyond the Middle East. For decades, the region has lived under the shadow of conflict, and now the declaration of war signals a new chapter, one that many are calling the end of Israel as we know it. What does this mean for the global balance of power? For years, Israel has stood with the backing of the United States and much of the Western world. But now the Arab world, long divided, appears to be uniting under the banner of resistance. Qatar, once seen as a mediator, has now taken a decisive step into the battlefield. This is not only a military confrontation, it is a political, economic, and ideological confrontation that challenges the very foundations of global capitalism and imperial influence in the Middle East. The West, especially Washington, will be forced to respond. But here's the question: can the United States afford another war? With its economy strained, its people divided, and its influence challenged by rising powers like China and Russia, America may no longer hold the same dominance it once did. Israel, once seen as untouchable, now faces a coalition it has never confronted before. And to the global audience, this is more than just a regional war. The energy markets will shake, currencies will react, alliances will shift, and every major power will be forced to choose a side. The Middle East, often dismissed as unstable, is now the center of world politics once again. Imagine what happens when the lifeline of oil and gas from the Gulf is weaponized. Consider the possibility of global inflation skyrocketing overnight. Think about the fragile peace in Europe and Asia, now held hostage to Middle Eastern conflict. These are not hypotheticals. They are the realities we must prepare for. When we talk about the Arab world, the story for decades has been one of division, mistrust, and competing interests. Yet, what we are witnessing today with Qatar and its Arab allies declaring war is nothing short of historic. For the first time in a generation, the Arab nations are not simply making statements or issuing condemnations. They are moving in unison, presenting a united front against Israel. This is not a symbolic act. It is a coordinated decision that shakes the foundations of Middle Eastern politics. Imagine the impact when states that have often struggled to agree on anything suddenly align on a singular cause. The unity itself becomes a weapon, and its effect is already echoing through the corridors of global power. For years, Israel has relied on a deeply fragmented Arab world to maintain its dominance. One country would oppose, another would mediate, while others remained silent. That fragmentation allowed Israel to act with relative impunity, confident that there was no real coordinated response from its neighbors. But today, that calculus has shifted. When Qatar, often portrayed as a balancing actor, moves decisively into the arena of war, it signals to the world that patience has run out and that resistance is no longer rhetorical. The question is no longer whether the Arab states will respond collectively, but rather how far this unity will go and how enduring it will prove to be. Consider the symbolism. For decades, Israel's security has been reinforced not only by its own military capacity, but also by the divisions of its adversaries. Now, imagine the scenario when those adversaries stop acting as individuals and begin acting as a coalition. That changes the mathematics of power dramatically. No longer can Israel rely on playing one Arab state against another. No longer can it trust that some will normalize relations while others protest from the sidelines. The announcement of September 15th reveals something unprecedented, a shared decision to stand together against what they view as aggression and occupation. Think about the global message this sends. It is not only about Israel, it is about challenging the geopolitical order that has governed the region since World War II. For Western powers, this unity poses a dangerous question. If the Arab states can align against Israel, what might they do next against Western influence itself? Could this be the beginning of a broader political awakening in the Middle East, one that seeks independence not only from Israel, but also from the economic and military dominance of the United States and Europe? These are not distant hypotheticals. They are immediate questions being asked in Washington, in Brussels, and in every financial center that relies on Middle Eastern stability to keep markets calm. Hooks like this cannot be ignored. What happens to global oil prices when the Arab states present themselves as one bloc rather than fractured rivals? What happens to Western foreign policy when its old tools of divide and rule no longer work? And perhaps most urgently, what happens when the Arab people themselves see their leaders speaking with one voice? That kind of momentum can ignite public sentiment in ways that go far beyond official declarations of war. Israel, of course, still maintains immense power and support, particularly from the United States. But unity among its neighbors fundamentally changes the nature of the conflict. Wars are not only fought with weapons, but with alliances, narratives, and collective will. The Arab states, by declaring war together, are signaling that this is no longer Israel versus one neighbor. It is Israel versus a region, and potentially Israel versus an idea of solidarity that transcends national borders. That makes the situation exponentially more complex, more dangerous, and more difficult for Israel to manage. This moment marks a shift from the past. It is no longer about fragmented reactions to Israeli policy, but about a decisive step toward coordinated action. And when coordination becomes the strategy, the scale of impact multiplies. One must ask if this unity holds, if it deepens, if it translates into economic leverage and political pressure on top of military confrontation. Then are we not looking at the possible unraveling of Israel's long-standing regional dominance? The answer, for many observers, is yes, and that is why the world is paying attention. The declaration of war by Qatar and its Arab allies is not merely a regional event. It is a signal that could shift the balance of global power in ways few anticipated. When a conflict emerges in the Middle East, the world does not simply watch, it reacts. Because the region is not only a battlefield, but also an economic artery for the planet. What makes September 15 so significant is that this war threatens to ripple far beyond the immediate military confrontation. It has the potential to destabilize global oil markets, weaken U.S. influence, and accelerate the rise of new alliances that challenge the very order established in the 20th century. Imagine the immediate shock to energy markets when news broke that war had been declared. Traders in London, New York, and Shanghai don't just read headlines, they translate them into prices, into risks, into the future of economies. Oil and gas are not just commodities, they are the blood supply of the modern world. When the Arab world, sitting on vast reserves, signals confrontation, the entire world economy begins to hold its breath. Even before the first military clash, energy prices can skyrocket, fueling inflation, straining governments, and placing ordinary citizens in the crossfire of economic instability. This is not theoretical. We have seen it before in the oil crisis of the 1970s. The difference now is scale. In a world already struggling with fragile supply chains, post-pandemic inflation, and geopolitical competition, another shock could prove devastating. But it goes deeper. The United States, long the guarantor of Israel's security and the dominant power in the Middle East, now faces a dilemma. For decades, Washington could dictate terms, deploy military forces, and exert pressure without serious challenge. Yet today, it finds itself stretched thin, its people divided, its resources consumed by other conflicts, and its global authority weakened by rivals who are eager to seize the moment. Russia and China, both critical energy and trade partners for the Arab world, will not stand idle. They see opportunity in this moment, opportunity to expand their influence at America's expense. The war, therefore, is not just between Israel and its neighbors. It is part of a broader contest over who will define the global order in the decades to come. Here's the hook. What happens when Washington is forced to choose between defending Israel at all costs and maintaining its already fragile standing in Asia and Europe? Can it afford another war that drains billions of dollars and fuels domestic unrest? And if the US falters even slightly, does that not create the space for Moscow and Beijing to present themselves as alternative partners for the Arab states? This is where the global power shift begins, not with battles fought on the ground, but with battles fought in diplomacy, in markets, and in the imaginations of leaders deciding where their future lies. At the same time, this conflict threatens to create fractures within Western alliances. Europe, already burdened with energy crisis, may not be able to follow Washington unquestioningly if the war disrupts supplies from the Gulf. Countries like Germany, dependent on stable flows of energy, will be forced to weigh loyalty to Israel against the survival of their own economies. That kind of calculation could weaken NATO unity and open fissures that adversaries will eagerly exploit. The war, in this way, is not contained. It spreads into boardrooms, parliaments, and alliances around the world. Think also of the global South, nations long marginalized in world politics, but now rising in economic importance. If the Arab states align their resources and their politics with powers like China, this creates an alternative pole of influence. Countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America may see in this conflict not just a war, but an opportunity to escape the orbit of Western dominance. Suddenly, the events of September 15 become more than a regional confrontation. They become the trigger for a multipolar world. And here is the most compelling point, the so called End of Israel, is not only a question of military outcomes. It is a metaphor for the unraveling of an order in which Western dominance and Israeli power were assumed to be permanent. The declaration of war shatters that assumption. It shows that the global stage is now open, contested, and uncertain. From energy prices to military alliances, from Washington to Beijing, the shockwaves of this war will reshape the future. The old world is collapsing before our eyes, and what rises to replace it is still unknown. In conclusion, September 15th will be remembered as a turning point. Whether it marks the end of Israel, the collapse of Western dominance, or the beginning of a new world order, one thing is clear: the old balance of power is gone. The Arab world has spoken with one voice, and the consequences will be felt in every corner of the planet. The question we must ask ourselves is simple: are we ready for the world that comes after?